You're listening to It Takes a Village podcast with Liberty,
Megan,
and Brianna, where you don't have to be perfect, you just have to be you.
Today we are so honored to welcome a guest whose work speaks to the heart of motherhood, healing, and transformation. Louise Perry is a licensed social worker, motherhood therapist, and the compassionate force behind Mother Sage Therapy Services and The Grove. And with a grounded, wise, and soulful approach, Louise has created a sanctuary for mothers navigating the complex terrain of matrescence, identity, and emotional wellness. Her work centers on the often unspoken truths of motherhood, grief, rage, joy, loss, and deep love. And she brings such a nurturing presence to every conversation. Welcome, Louise.
Welcome, Louise. We're so glad to have you. And we're here in the Grove.
We are here in the Grove. Mm-hmm. Cutest space we've filmed so far.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yay. We're so glad to have you.
Well, let's dive right into you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your why and about this space, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. Well, I'm a mother of a rambunctious 4-year-old. I've lived in the Valley for over 15 years now, so this is our home. I established my private practice, Mother Sage Therapy Services, about 3.5-ish, 4 years ago, and started working with the hospital right away. And so we just have this really beautiful mutual relationship where we support mothers in our valley, and I provide the psychotherapy services for them.
And how did you come up with the idea for the space?
That's a good question. Well, that kind of takes me back to my own personal experience as a mother, I think. When I became a mom and I was just freshly new, one of the hardest experiences I had was being alone a lot with my child. Granted, context-wise, it was the pandemic, yes. Very different, but it really spoke to how I needed more people around me more often on a daily basis. And I just got to a place where I was really incredibly lonely and isolated. And I don't think any mother deserves to feel that way. And unfortunately, what we've seen is we didn't really come out of the pandemic sort of solving that problem. It kind of just stayed. And so mothers are continuously being isolated, and it's become kind of like a norm to be alone with your child for an extended period of time, that it's fine, right? That you should be happy and fine, and there's a little bit of fulfilled, right? And there's also this like privacy piece, I think, for a lot of parents, that parenting is a private matter, and so you do it within your home. You feel kind of protected over your parenting style and your children, and so it's harder to go out into the world and trust others too. I think the pandemic really drove that in, of feeling like we can't trust our neighbors and the people down the street or the person at the grocery store, and so we kind of just like hunker down into our own little nook, and where we learn to survive in that. And it's really surviving, it's not thriving. And so all I wanted was a place like this where I could just go and be with other mothers and go to a place that was not overstimulating. So that's the biggest piece I think that I want to share about the Grove, is that it really came from that there's a lot of child center spaces, but there's not a lot of mother center spaces. And what I mean by that is it's not really filling the cups of the mothers. And so I think about just a lot of the activities that my child likes to do are often overstimulating for me. And so I need a quiet place and where she can be herself and I can be myself. And so that was the whole purpose behind the Grove, is to have it mother-centered, which is also child-centered too.
Do you feel like you get overstimulated at home too if it's not exactly how you want it?
A little bit.
Because I'm like that too.
Yep, a little bit. Having a clean house, everything in order, everything
like
organized.
Now,
so even something simple as that can be a barrier to inviting people over and having a play date. I'm guilty of that.
Me too.
I'll be like, I just can't manage right now, so let's just call it off, right?
Yeah.
But how sad is that?
Yeah.
That's keeping me from having deep, meaningful, connection and community. And for my daughter, who doesn't care if the house is clean, the kids don't care.
Yeah.
Right.
Neither does the other mother.
Neither does the other mother.
Not nearly
No, they
as
don't.
much as
We've had that conversation, Brie. Like, I have a weird thing with it. And it's not that my house is uber clean. It's actually the opposite. I think that's why I'm so sensitive to it. And I'm just like, I don't know. And reassured me multiple times, and Megan too, like, it's okay. Like, it does not matter what your house looks like.
Well, I think it really speaks to how important space is to us as human beings, and especially when we're indoors a lot, right? Like, we really want our space to, like, be comfortable. And I think it plays into our, like, nervous system, right? Like, if our space feels safe and comfortable, we can let our nervous system kind of, and that feels so good, right? But the thing is like, when we become parents, we're inviting in chaos.
Yeah.
And so even though we want this like calming space, we also have to tolerate the chaos that's going to ensue of our children piling up toys in the middle of the living room.
And you might have like accomplished a system that worked before you had that kid
Precisely.
that now doesn't work anymore.
Nope, it all goes out the window.
Do you work with moms on that a lot, like tools to manage that nervous system when you're feeling that way?
In the work I do, it's doing it on a subtle level instead of being like, let's figure out how to manage like on that surface level. We're really getting to like the deeper part of the discomfort of like, you know, what about the chaos feels really uncomfortable to you? And how do we learn to tolerate it? Because it's not really going to go away.
It's going to change.
It's going to change. And we want our children to like start participating in the family in terms of being like, yeah, you know, let's all help each other out and, you know, help take care of the house and make it a calm space for everybody, you know. And sometimes it takes us all the way back to our childhood of like, what was our house like growing up?
Oh,
and was it chaotic? And if it was chaotic, it's really hard to sit with that as an adult because you might be working really hard to get so far away from that chaos.
To correct it, right?
To correct it. And then we overcompensate.
Yeah. There's moments sometimes when, I don't know, it's usually the hardest days when you just don't clean and cleaning's just doesn't fit that day.
Yeah.
And usually like late at night, I have these, I don't know if any other mothers are like this, like they're usually the last ones up or thinking about different things, and I'll walk around my house and I similarly will try to be grateful for it. A lot of times I'm not. A lot of times I let it stress me out. But there are some really beautiful moments where I'm standing at this side of my living room and everything is chaos, okay? Like there's toys everywhere. Minna likes to pull everything out right now. But it's really beautiful. I'm like, there's a little child in my house. And this is a really special time. And like, yes, I'm going to have to clean this up. But I'm not going to see these toys for a long time. And pretty soon she's going to want space from me. And so it's just to have those moments where you realize like, okay, this is just a sign that she is here. And that is, I can be grateful for that. But you talked about how, you know, you're not necessarily working on the surface level. And do you want to speak to a little bit of your approach in kind of the bottom up versus top down?
Sure.
Or just how you think about therapy now that you're a mom and your approach?
That's a great question. I think to start, we have to have this understanding that well-being is on a spectrum. So we can have someone on one end who is flourishing, right, in motherhood. And on the other end, we can have someone who is really surviving and maybe not even coping at that on that side of the spectrum. And so I like to give that some context in terms of how each of us mothers kind of sit on that spectrum differently, uniquely, right? Each of us are going to be in one place, and it's going to change over time too, right? Certain milestones. You know, I think about toddlerhood being a really triggering time for a lot of parents, and it can send us into like more of that survival, really feeling like you're not coping. And so that kind of sets us up understanding that we're all just going to like have our own unique, complex experience as mothers. And so through my therapy, I have to see it through that lens, that each woman that walks through my door is coming with her own set of personal experiences and where she sits on that spectrum. And then I have two other lenses that I see through. And one of them is the concept of matrescence. And this concept is really important to me on a personal level because it helped me in my own mothering experience, but it also gives a word to this experience of change that is happening for mothers when they step into their role of mothering. And matrescence, like adolescence. It's
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yep. It's just like when we were young and we were growing into becoming adults, and our whole bodies were changing, our brains were changing, our way of thinking about the world was changing. We're asking ourselves, who do I want to be in the world? It's an enormous change, right? And so I like to think about, what if we didn't have the word adolescence and we were watching these young people go through the emotions and the inability to control themselves and all the changes in their peer relationships and their identity. Like, what if we didn't have a word for that? We would be confused and as a society, and we'd be like, what is happening, right? And I think that's what's happening for mothers, right? Is like, we didn't have this word for a long time, and mothers were going through this massive change, right? On all levels, spiritually, biologically, psychologically, socially, even politically, we change as individuals. Our social standing just completely changes, right? And so if once we understand that, once we see that, then we can be like, okay, I get it now. Mm-hmm. How can I help you? Right now we've gotten to this place with teenagers and adolescents that we can be like, okay, we understand how your brain works. Let's help you now. Like, guide you in this time frame of puberty, right? And mothers need the same. We need people who understand this developmental stage. It's a word that is like soothing to your soul.
It makes it real and something that we can advocate for, and just it takes away the loneliness.
Takes away the
feeling
loneliness.
like you can't name something.
Yeah, it was a really powerful experience to land on this word personally. To give you context, 8 months postpartum was like when I sort of really started to sink and feel the weight of motherhood. And that was because I was 8 months of experiencing isolation. And it finally got to me. It kind of hit me.
It's a really long
right?
time.
Yeah. And the first few months of being with my daughter was beautiful because it was just me and her, and I could do what I wanted, and I didn't have anyone coming over and telling me how to do things, right? You remember those like early days of like trying to figure things out and learning together?
Even my husband was at
right?
work. It was lovely.
But like, I could walk around my house, you know, like with whatever I wanted to wear. You know, it was just her and I and my husband, and it was so beautiful. And we didn't have anyone telling us how to do things or any expectations. We could all just learn together.
Figure it out, yeah.
Without any judgment, right? And so it felt like a very safe place. But then all of a sudden, after 8 months, that safe place turned into not so safe. It felt trapping. Right, I was trapped, right? And my freedom was gone. I couldn't just get in my car and go. And so I really started to sink pretty deep. I wouldn't have called it depression at the time because it didn't feel like that. It felt something different. In fact, I wasn't depressed. I was angry.
Oh, yeah, sure.
That's how it came out for me. I was so angry.
That's how it came out for me, too.
Yeah, and it's such an intense feeling, right?
Especially if you're not, in general, an angry person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just explain it like being like the rug being pulled out from underneath of me, right? And all of a sudden I'm just like in this mental and emotional state that I've never experienced before, and I didn't know how to ask for help, and I didn't know what I needed.
Yeah.
All I knew is that I was angry, and the person that I was angry at was my husband. Because he was the only other adult that was like part of my house, right? So he could get in his car and go to work. Right?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And in fact,
I remember that exact feeling.
Like, isn't that nice that you can just get
You
in your
just
car?
get to go somewhere.
you just get to go somewhere,
I
right?
can't even get my hair done without it being the whole thing.
I can't even go to the bathroom. You
Or
guys.
shower, yeah.
I know.
The shower thing for a while, yeah.
Yeah, well, and it was really, when he left, it wasn't just the fact that he had this autonomy, right? Like he could just free.
Yes, that's
it was
the
that
feeling.
my last source of adult connection was actually leaving me alone.
Yeah.
And I had nobody else. And so I was just starved to talk to somebody, to be with someone. And that was a huge value of mine before the pandemic, was social connection. Like friendships were everything to me. I spend a lot of time connecting with friends. Like that's like my top priority list. So when I got to that place, I didn't understand what was happening. And my anger turned into rage. And it felt like it kind of felt like this like click that just happened and you're all of a sudden just like a monster. You're just angry. And so if you, at the time, so context-wise, again, if you go online, I'm thinking about, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, what was being talked about around postpartum rage was that it was just a click that happened in your head. So it was very out of control feeling.
Yeah.
Being like, what's going to happen? Who am I going to turn into? What am I going to do? Right?
Can I click it back?
Can I click it back? Right?
Yeah.
And I couldn't say anything. I couldn't speak to what was really happening. It just felt this overwhelming emotional pain, and it had to go somewhere, and it had to come out in anger. That was my only choice, right? And so I was telling Liberty that what I ended up doing, because it felt really driven by my husband. Like, it really did feel like this part of our relationship, something was happening within our relationship and our partnership where he didn't understand what I was going through. And he could go to work, and he could go and hang out with friends because he was, doing things outside, he was taking care of his body. Yeah. He was like getting all his needs met. Where
Exactly.
I couldn't get any of my needs met at that time because I honestly didn't know what they were. And it really has to do with how we think about our roles as parents within our identity, where a mother, it's all consuming, and for a dad, it's not all consuming.
Correct.
They still see themselves as employees and workers, and right? Like, it's not this all consuming experience. And so I ended up going onto Google, because this is what we do when we're desperate and don't have anybody else around us to talk things through. And I typed in Google, why do I hate my husband so much after having kids? Lo and behold, a book comes up.
Okay.
It's titled,
Why do I hate
Why Do I Hate My Husband After Having Kids?
Okay, I need to look this up.
It's a good one.
We're
really,
going to link that in the resources.
yes. Yeah. I mean, it was really this moment, like, I didn't even care what was inside the book, but the fact that there was a book titled was like, like the angels came
It's not
down.
just me.
It came down and rescued me from this pain of being like, you're not alone. Like, something's happening and other people are talking about it. And so I was like, okay, like, if people are talking about it, then I'm going to find some more information. So I actually dived deep into like the well of the internet to find out what was wrong with me, because it didn't feel like postpartum depression. And in fact, even like just having that title to my experience of like something is wrong with me didn't also feel right. I knew nothing was wrong with me. It felt bigger than that. And I ended up through, like finding different authors and books and things, and then I landed on matrescent.
Yeah.
For the first time I heard that word.
Yeah.
And it just like, it hit me in a place that I never felt before in my entire life. And that's how these women were talking about it. Was like, we've landed on something huge here, and we need to share it with the world. And so I'm just going to name drop Dr. Orly Athen, because she is really responsible for bringing this word back into the public domain. She recovered this word. It was originally coined in the 1970s, believe it or not, right? By a doctor, she's an anthropologist, Dana Raphael. And so she went and noticed that mothers, when a woman became a mother, her social standing was changing within the community.
Interesting.
And she said, something's happening, right? I'm watching this woman, like her whole community is shifting and changing as she steps into this role. We are appreciating and honoring the fact that like dad is now grandpa, brother is now uncle, and now now this woman is now a mom. It's not just about the baby. And so I became really intrigued and interested, and ended up taking, a 3-month course on matrescence and listening to all the podcasts that I could find, listening to Dr. Orly Athen speak about what she was learning in her research and how she was teaching it, and how she's learning to understand this word and how it applies to modern mothers, which then led me to the second, which is, I think, one of the most important lenses that I have to use with mothers, which is understanding the social and cultural context of modern motherhood right now, and the assumptions and ideals and expectations that we have. So I want you to think about this for a second. So we have a woman going through this massive change. It's organic, it's natural, it's a rite of passage. She is supposed to change. She is supposed to transform. It is a place of transformation. It is the heroine's journey. Let's think about the culture in which she's changing in.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about what is labeled the patriarchal motherhood or normative motherhood. And that changes everything in terms of how you support a mother through matrescence. Mm-hmm. Because now we're adding in this whole other layer of understanding that she has to be perfect, that she has to be grateful for her mothering role. She has to be ever so fulfilled, right? There's all these really, really rigid and intense assumptions that mothers now have to hold. The messaging is so loud. So you can imagine as you're going through this major transformation and the world is telling you don't change.
Yeah, change as little as possible. Go back to how you were.
Yeah, go back to how you were, right? And look happy doing it. I think that's the most important piece here. And when we think about transition, so any transition we have in life, right? Like changing jobs, moving houses, going off to college, there's always going to be a natural state of disorientation. And there's nothing wrong with that state of disorientation. We need to feel it because it's just reorienting us into our new life. And along with disorientation is grief, right? What did we leave behind? Yeah. And we have to honor that. And if we live in a society that says you're not allowed to feel sad now that you're a mom, or you're not allowed to feel disoriented and I'm not going to help you through it or guide you through it, we're going to start to really suffer and feel a deep sense of shame. Something is wrong with me because I feel these painful emotions when I should be feeling all the positive, right?
It's almost like there's like a form of like passive gaslighting that happens where it's not even that they're saying, no, I won't help you. It's that they're not acknowledging anything has happened at all. And that is so wild to feel.
Nothing has happened at all. Yeah. So when we can hold the space for mothers as they're like going through this monumental change and understand the society in which they live in, right, then we can really support them in these deep, deep, deep nourishing ways, right? And the goal is to work towards a sense of authenticity. What that word means to me is that we are going to understand you as the unique individual you are and really try to figure out what you need and what you want out of this mothering experience, right? So again, if we pull back and look at this from a social stance, right, over time, women's roles have changed in society, right? If we think about the second wave feminist movement, 1960s, right, women were wanting to go into the workforce. They were demanding it. They were saying, I'm not going to be at home anymore with my kid. It's not helping me. I want more out of life. I don't just want to be a mom. I want to pursue a career and have more of a purpose, which is really beautiful. But the thing is when that happened, the way we supported them in that, their needs didn't get met. So then we ended up just doing it all, doing both, right? Because we still haven't caught up to that movement as a society. And we still sort of are like, okay, if you want to do it all, fine, let's see you do it. Good luck. It's burning mothers out at high speeds. When we look at the numbers of the numbers that are being reported for, postpartum depression, anxiety are pretty high. 1 in 4, right? 1 in 5. Again, if we go back to our, where we are socially and as women's roles have changed, there's now this expectation that women sort of need to do it all. That you will have a career and you will be a mom. And if you don't do that, right, what kind of person, what kind of woman are you? Are you independent, strong, right? We've worked really hard to be these beautiful, independent, strong women sharing the same space as men And so now what we're seeing and watching is women now wanting to stay home with their children. They want to be with them, but now they have this expectation that they should actually be at work or be doing something else for themselves. And we're watching this. It's like this ever shifting thing that's happening right now of expectation. I think we're trying to work this out right now. I think a lot of these are really important questions we need to be asking. And I really think it goes back to our socialization. Like if we have this understanding of like what, even when they were little boys, what were they watching and observing from their dads, right? And what are little girls watching and observing from their moms, right? All the way up to what does it mean to be a good girl? And what does it mean to be a perfect woman? And what does it mean to be a perfect mom now, right? Like all of that gets like just like kind of funneled through, and it's subtle. It can feel really subtle. And so we have to pay attention within our families of like, how are these things being played out?
Yes.
Right? How can we slow things down enough to have these really important conversations about who's carrying the mental load, and how do I help you see the invisible work when maybe you weren't taught to see it? And so really we just have to kind of step back and observe for a little bit and be like, okay, how is this all playing out? And what can I do to like sidestep some of these antiquated or outdated, these gender roles?
So you talked about how the role of woman has changed, and we're now kind of straddling this world of work or stay at home and these binaries. And how does that play into the concept of self-care and, wellness and what that looks like? And there's just a lot of guilt, I feel like, that comes from any decision that we make, whatever way we feel like we have to go. So can you speak to kind of self-care, mom guilt, and those dualities?
Yeah. I think it goes back to that piece of authenticity as we're like figuring out what we really want out of our own experience and knowing the difference between what that feels like and what we should be doing.
Yes.
Right? And so, again, if we think about what modern mothers' expectations are, we have seen this, a lot of women would love to pursue a career and be in the workforce and do it all. And that has sort of set up this new standard of like, what does it mean to be a mom, and also maybe an overly attached mom if you choose to want to stay at home with your kid. What does it mean to be an independent, strong woman now, right? Knowing that we've worked really hard to be in the workforce. And so a lot of, I think, mothers, myself included, felt this. We had to practice self-care without our children, right? We had to pursue purposes outside our mothering without our children, because that's what a strong, independent woman does now, right? She can be a mom, but don't let her be too attached, because that's not what a strong, independent woman looks like. Does that make sense?
And also we don't have time and space for the attachment.
And we don't have time. That's a whole nother piece of it, right? When we're doing it all, how much can we give when we're giving everything we have already? Yeah. Right. And so I just like to point out that oftentimes mothers will have this advice given to them, or, someone saying, oh, you look tired. Why don't you go take a nap? But all they really want to do is just snuggle with their baby. And so how do we let them call the shots on their own and say, this is what I need, and kind of be able to really, again, sidestep what other people are trying to make them do, or what they think is good for them. And so it really does go back to this authenticity piece of like, what do you want as a mother? You get to decide if you pursue a career or not, or you want to stay home or not, right? That's entirely up to you, and no one gets to decide that except for you. And of course, there's other things that play into that, right? Which is financial stability. Often families right now we don't even have a choice, actually.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So it makes sense, right, financially, but it may not make sense emotionally, right? And that's really, really a sticky, hard spot for a lot of mothers, right? Is that they don't get the privilege to choose.
And the frustrating part is that this society has been set up to for that.
Yeah.
It's been set up for us to fail.
Precisely.
And this is the intersection of capitalism.
Yep.
It's
Yeah.
so frustrating. Meanwhile, I grew up in Switzerland. So in Europe, it's set up where there are opportunities for success in that way. And there are support systems in place for that.
Yeah, and I think you guys are just really highlighting this other layer, right, of like what are the social supports that are helping us thrive. There's very little. We are set up to fail in that way, right? Is that we don't have maternity and paternity leave. We don't have affordable childcare.
But then when you do fail, the system is set up in a way that you feel like you've failed.
You failed. Yep.
Not the system.
There's something wrong with you, right? And so that's why this conversation is so important, is because it helps mothers really like sit back and see the bigger picture of what's actually happening, that it has nothing to do with you. You are not broken. There is nothing wrong with you. You are trying to mother in a system that is broken.
Yes, amen.
Right? Yep. Yeah. And I'm shout out to my mentor, Chelsea Robinson, who says, this is not a me problem. This is a we problem.
Yes.
And we need to see it as that for us to really support families and mothers.
And so you had, talked about the importance of partners in this whole process. Like this is our, like you said, the one other adult relationship around us at this time of massive change. Do you want to speak a little bit about partnerships and the transformation of partnerships in this process?
Yeah. I think it's one of the most important topics of conversation that we don't have, right? If we think about how we're pregnant, we're really excited, we're going to bring a baby into the world, and we're taking birth classes, and we're taking, maybe we're learning more about our bodies and pregnancy and preparing for the baby and getting all the baby stuff ready. But what we're not talking about is how is our partnership going to change?
Yeah.
And I think this is more important than anything else, right? It's kind of like when we have a wedding, we're thinking about the wedding and we're not thinking about the marriage, right? Again, like we need to be thinking about the long term here, right? I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier of this phenomenon that happens when we all of a sudden become parents, something shifts within the gender roles in our family. Mother often, I'm speaking generalities here, right? Women, mothers often kind of get bombarded with the mental load, all the invisible work, all the to-dos, the cognitive, right? Like lists of ordering diapers and meal planning and paying the bills and all of that, all of a sudden just becomes part of a mother's experience. Yeah, and so we're seeing this across like all households, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's pretty generalized, right? That we're all kind of sitting with this like, what just happened, right? Like I thought we were going to share it together, and now it's very divided and it's unequal feeling, right? And so we can get into these like big pitfalls with our partner around what's fair and not fair and what's equal and not equal. And that is not the conversation where it needs to go. It needs to, we actually, again, slowing down and stepping back and seeing how we've been socialized to assume these roles and what's going to actually fit in our family. Because again, I think each family's different.
Exactly.
Right? And what is most important to us in terms of like, maybe to me doing the dishes is not as important to my husband, or doing the laundry, or whatever it is. Like we have to figure out together where we can compromise and collaborate, right? And use each other's strengths.
And if you can have that conversation before the baby arrives. Yes, exactly. I think it's a really important question of like, how are we going to handle the workload together so neither of us feel burnt out or overwhelmed or we're not doing enough, right? Because I think that's often what happens is when we try to approach this conversation when we're already like knee deep in it and we're feeling that emotional pain of I'm doing all the work by myself, it comes out as you're not doing enough. And that creates such a rift within the relationship because neither one of us want to feel like we're not doing enough because we are doing
And so much.
A lot.
So much the conversation turns into, if you're using the I statements, like I feel, overwhelmed or burnt out and I feel like I'm doing more. And then the other person is just in position to defend and say, I am doing so much too. And then you just do this back and forth, back and forth.
Exactly.
I'm doing so much. I'm doing so much. I'm
And
doing
you're
so
both
much.
already so
The research tells us that when partners become parents, like our level of happiness decreases, and it starts to make sense why, right? Because we're just holding so much, and we're not really seeing it from each other's perspectives, and that's really critical. Of like, how can I get in your shoes for a minute here and see what this is like for you? Because that's where the like undoing comes from. Is
Exactly.
saying, wow, you are holding a lot, and how can we help each other? Because the truth about it is we are doing the work of probably, I'm going to say, like 8 to 15 other people need to be helping us with.
Yeah, it feels like it.
Right? Wow. So if we think about, this is a really interesting thing to think about. 95% of our time on this planet has been lived in hunter-gatherer societies. Wow. 95%. We've been doing this modern civilization thing for 5% of our time, right? So that's not that much, right? And it's actually going against our evolutionary needs in terms of like raising children in a community and communally and sharing the tasks of the whole community.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so when we look at these hunter-gatherer societies, we see about 8 to 15 to 25 other adults helping raise one child. So we've dwindled the family unit down to 2 people, much less, one. Oftentimes, just one person who's doing the work of what needs to be several individuals. The concept that time is money, right, this whole term, creates this notion or belief that labor is only labor if you get paid for it. And so this becomes a really contentious thing when we become parents and our labor is not paid. So a mother's work, all the daily tasks she's doing, is not really seen as labor.
Right.
And so if that is a belief that you hold within your family, that conversation will turn into a conflict.
Yeah.
Because now we're not even talking about the same thing anymore. We're one person is saying, I need help, and I'm tired, and I'm exhausted, and I have too much on my plate. And the other person is saying, well, that's not work to me. And so there's this assumption that when a mom is at home with her children, that it's easy.
That it's not work.
That it's not work. And it is so much work because you're also holding the emotional labor of the family. You're trying to, work through all the big emotions that are happening for you as you're changing as a mother, but then you're also helping this little human become an emotionally stable person too. And that takes a lot of work.
And then you're also kind of expected to drive the conversations around your needs. And that's a weight of like bringing it to your partner in a way that is palatable for them. And that's work. That's emotional labor that you're also doing on behalf of your partner.
To ask for your needs, right? It's a lot of work. And so we will probably be more than willing to put our needs to the side.
Yeah.
Right?
It's easier.
It's easier. And a good mother is a self-sacrificing mother, right? A good partner is also self-sacrificing, right? So if we think about our identities as a partner and a mother, right, sometimes a lot of times those two things are together. And I think some really important questions to ask is, what does it mean to me to be a good mom, and how do I need to be supported in that? What does it mean for me to be a good dad, and what do I need to be supported in that? I think those are two really important questions we need to be asking ourselves all the time, even continuously through our parenting journey. Like, again, like if we get to these big milestones, like adolescence and teenager, even like early adult, right? Like, are you feeling like a good dad right now? And what does that look like to you? And do you need, like, what kind of support? And is it a reasonable support too? Is it sustainable for me to support you in that way as well, right? Yeah. We want to make sure it's sustainable, whatever it is. No one's mental or emotional well-being is being sacrificed for each other.
Do you have any advice for mothers who really want to have these conversations and really want to initiate these types of things with their partners, but might feel like they either don't have the tools or the words, or that they're having to educate first before having the conversation? Because a lot of this assumes that these concepts are understood.
Yeah,
and
it
they
does.
just aren't. And that's another form of labor that we're providing to even get to this point where we can ask for help?
I think that's a really good question. And I think to not make it so complicated and really simplify is really just embody curiosity instead of judgment, right? And that's really hard to do when we're in a state of survival and we're just like, I can't do this anymore. But if we can really try to just be curious about each other's experience, what is this like for you? Tell me, and allow each other to like express what's real and build that language. The only way I could have spoke to my experience of being lonely and bored was only because my husband allowed me to be. He was curious and I was curious. And curiosity, right? Curiosity is really a playful experience, right? If we think about what it means to be curious as a child, like we're just interested and we're intrigued and we have no judgment. We're just like, how does this work? Tell me, I want to understand. And there's so much love in that. There's so much love and curiosity. And so if we can just be curious, that will give us so much information, because I think what's happening is there's so much unspoken information that's not being shared.
So many assumptions.
We're mind reading, we're assuming, we're looking at this mother who, she has a smile on her face, trying to push through. I got it all together.
Yeah.
Does she really?
There's so many assumptions about how other mothers are doing too.
Yeah.
Against your own
my gosh,
experience.
Yep, exactly.
The comparison.
Yeah.
So she seems so happy.
She seems so happy. So as soon as we lay down, right, as soon as we can just lay down the judgments and the mind reading and embody curiosity, that's the gold. And our first inclination might be to be like, something is wrong with you. You need help, versus being like, wow, like, help, what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Like, help me understand what's going on. I really want to be here for you. And we each are going to find our own language around that, right?
Yeah.
But that curiosity is so important.
In those situations where the partner isn't curious, if you're the one driving that curiosity, but the
great
partner
question.
doesn't,
That can
reflect
be really
that.
hard, right? And you're landing on something that we're all kind of reckoning with right now, of having an even playing field around self-awareness.
Yeah.
Right? Emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Emotional regulation, right? All those words around what it means to be a mature adult. And we are seeing this, kind of unequal ability to do the self-reflection and to be present and to work hard to embody curiosity, right? And I'm just going to say that, again, this goes back to our socializing in terms of like how, and again, in generalities, men typically as young boys were taught, don't cry, don't be weak, right? Don't show your emotion. Women, we were more taught to be in relationships with each other, right? Relating, nurturing, caring, like all that is sort of socialized into us. Whereas for men, like, they're taught to be strong and silent.
exactly.
Or starting to look at old wounds. Once you open that first door of vulnerability, it's like, oh my gosh, my relationship with my parents. Oh my gosh, my dad, my mom. And I wanted to touch on that a little bit because I think oftentimes we hear one of the most challenging parts of becoming a parent is the work that you do as an individual in the process, and having to do that or being faced with that oftentimes during parenting, and then having to figure out how to be a parent simultaneously while also personally growing so much. And it's
Breaking
really
the
hard.
generational
It's
trauma.
so heavy.
It's so heavy. Yeah, I think that's a good thing to bring up, because what I have found in my work is that when we step into our roles as parents, it's almost like we step into some sort of like portal into the past, right? And all these like, I call them ghosts, right? These old ghosts just like all of a sudden are just like surrounding us of
It's so true.
look at me, and whispering in our ear and telling us all these old beliefs and
ghosts you thought were like gone,
right? And these ghosts can even extend back generations, right? And so a lot of people are talking about generational healing and breaking the cycle and things like that. And that is a huge task to undertake as you're trying to help a new human who has not experienced any of that come into this world.
And it feels like an immediate pressure.
Yeah.
Like you see all your ghosts and you're like, I don't want my child to have any of these ghosts.
So get rid of them as fast as possible. And so
possible.
we tend to overcompensate, or we bury them, right? We avoid, suppress, right? And try really hard to keep that stuff. We don't even want to go there and talk about, because it can feel too overwhelming, right? To think about what it was like for us as children and not getting the needs we actually didn't get, right? That's a really big thing to land on and say, I didn't get the love I needed as a kid. And it comes with lots of grief and
Painful.
and it's so hard to tolerate, right? But we have to do that work. We have to somehow slowly over time dip our toes into it and say, yeah, this is what was real for me as a kid, and I didn't get what I needed, but that doesn't mean I'm going to use that to parent. That my kid didn't live my life, and I'm going to see them for who they really are as the individuals they are and help them get their needs met. And so, yeah, I mean, now we fully understand. Now you guys can kind of see what we're working with here. It's a lot. And we need a lot of support, and we need a lot of guidance, and we actually need elders. Right? Kind of holding our hand and walking us through this. And we don't really have that. We don't have these role models who are out there showing us how to do this sustainably in an environment that is not sustainable.
Just thinking about all these challenges and the weight of this and the services that you're providing here in Gunnison, is there anything specific to Gunnison about the challenges of living in a small town? What do you see are kind of the results of living in a little bit less of a metropolitan area during this whole process?
That's a really interesting question. I think we do have some unique challenges, or at least characteristics about living in a rural mountain town that separate us from maybe a city experience. I think our hard winters, I would say, number one, is really hard for new moms and dads, right? When I think about this past winter and how cold it was, we couldn't
so long.
We couldn't leave our house.
Yeah.
Right? We couldn't leave our house. And that can be really hard when we actually, our community lives a lot of our time outside.
Yeah.
A lot of people move here and live here to be outside, right? We live in such a beautiful part of the world, and we really want to be in nature, and we do a lot of our activities outside or exercises outside, right? And so when we're inside for the winter and it's that cold and it's actually unsafe to even bring a baby out in the cold, how are we going to even go to the grocery store? Sometimes it feels that's too much, and even coming to a place like the Grove can feel like I can't do it, right? I'm not going to do it because it's a lot. So if we remember what it was like to even get a little baby into their car seat into their car and warm up the car, it's too much. And then you're, the whole you can't put your baby in a car seat with their big puffy jacket. And so then how are we going to do this? Right? How are we going to do this?
I'm just going to stay home.
So I think that's a big piece of this. And to give some medicine, I think, to that piece, if I can speak to that, as we, think about maybe next winter, and if you're pregnant and you're preparing for your newborn, I really like to pull from, maybe you can help me with this, Megan, the Higa. Is this Swiss?
In
Finland and
Sweden and stuff.
Yeah. This concept that's what, they've been practicing this for hundreds of years, right? To get through
cozy.
to get through the long winters, right? They knew they had to stay inside. It was harsh, dark, cold winters. How were they going to survive? And they learned to take that village inside, right? And to embrace each other and do lots of dinners together and cozy, warm things. And so I like to really talk to that. I think that's a really helpful practice. But how can we do that sustainably?
Yeah.
My experience here, growing up in Switzerland, I'm very surprised by, and not all families are like this, but it seems like there's this idea of feed the kid, I'll go do things. We don't all have to sit together at the same time.
I'll do
which I
dishes
think
or-
it happens and it's totally normal. But what we do in my household is we are always sitting down together at the dinner table at the same time. And if we don't, it's very unique and it's special. We try to make it special for Avery. But also this concept, and my parents were very good at this, like having friends over for dinner. We all come together and we were there for hours. And it wasn't, hey, come bring the kids and let's let them play together. It was, come have dinner with us. The kids are also there. So it was more about their community and them being socialized and still having that side of their life. And we just existed in that. And it was okay. And it was really fun for us as kids. And it taught us too, like, oh, this is what it is. This is what it's about.
Time spent.
Yeah. And so, like, when you guys come over and we do dinner,
I love that.
I look at it that way too. We have them over and we're all having dinner. And if there are other kids there, they're playing and then they come and sit at the table. And it's really nice to be able to do that and give that space for ourselves and our kids to learn that.
And that's what you were speaking to earlier, where you're like, I want my kid to be a part of my self-care. Like, when I'm feeling
exactly.
good. We can model that.
Yeah, it's funny. My family lives here too. My sister's here, my mom's here. And so that's how we approach dinner. My husband's always like, it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
He just goes into it knowing is like, it's like planned days ahead and who's bringing what. And it's like half our day is gone if we do like a breakfast,
But it's not gone.
But it's not gone.
It's not
just
wasted at
doing
all.
something else.
It's doing something really meaningful.
Really valuable.
Being together.
Yes,
Yeah.
really valuable, right? Thank you so much for sharing that. And if you're listening, you can't see, I had a big smile on my face the whole time because this is what I'm working towards, right? Is like re-villaging ourselves. And we have to sometimes look to other cultures and see what they're doing because our culture, our Western culture is weird. There's people who study like anthropology, evolutionary, and there's folks who are starting to say we are living in an evolutionary mismatch. So what that means is that like however our brains and our nervous systems and our bodies like have been built over time, we're supposed to evolve to like our evolutionary needs are to be together, right? We're pack animals, right? We need this social connection on a regular basis. And right now through through capitalism, the patriarchal belief system, all of that has slowly created really intense isolation, right?
Dissonances.
And it's happening in really small micro interactions too. It's not happening in like these big ways, but it's happening in our daily lives. Like, are we choosing to be on our phone instead of making eye contact with someone, right? Are we choosing to not say hi to the grocery clerk because we're so busy, right? And all these things just stack up over time. And when we live in a rural community, right, we're even more isolated, physically. And so we have to work extra hard to kind of break out of that isolation. And it's going to take doing some pretty radical things like inviting people over to our house and having dinner and having it slow. Slowly cooking, right? Slowly enjoying the meal together, right? Just being with each other, which is everything we've not been taught.
And it feels so good.
And so your nervous system is actually, you're having this transformational experience in that moment, right? Of like, oh, I'm attuning to what my evolutionary needs are. And how often do we get to actually feel that?
Yeah.
And it's not prioritizing keeping the kid entertained.
Has nothing
keeping
to
the
do with
kid
that.
happy.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's about this is what we need.
Yeah.
And then you leave
And
that
the child
experience.
is learning that too.
Yeah.
And you leave that experience realizing, oh, I really needed that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna
You
run.
want it? You should
I'm
explain.
So sorry.
Explain to them where you're going.
I have to go to work.
We're going to keep interviewing,
We do.
and Megan is going to
I
step
have to go run a advisory council, alumni advisory council retreat.
Okay.
So I will go do that.
Thank you so much, Megan.
I was going to say one aspect of this that I really love is, we were talking about at the beginning of the podcast, like how hard it is to have people in your home and it has to be clean and you have to kind of do this performative version of yourself a lot of times, or that's what it feels like occasionally. So when you have this amount of people over and you have this like communal approach to eating, you can involve them in the process, and it doesn't feel, because for me, sometimes when I think about inviting people over, I'm like, oh, I have to make, everything has to be ready and pretty by the time everyone gets here. That's not the point. I was just thinking about how awesome it is to involve everyone in the process, because I think a lot of times we feel this need to have a performative side of like, come into my house, look how amazing it is, look at this amazing food, and everything has to be perfect by the time everyone arrives, and it's a fancy dinner party, you know? But that's just part of it. The beauty is in the mess of it.
Incredibly important. And I just want to mention that to be able to come from that community mindset, right, and start to value people, right, on a regular basis, inviting people into our hearts and into our homes, right, it takes a lot of work, actually. So this is not something that just happens overnight where, and again, I think it can be a source of shame for a lot of moms of like, who are isolated deeply, right, and don't have a lot of friend moms and are really scared to even talk to someone at the park, right? Yeah. And I just want to like speak to that, because I think we don't want to further drive in like, okay, because you don't have this group of friends, or you don't have friendships, you don't even have people to invite over, then there's something wrong with you. I think some of us have been able to like accept isolation and sort of live with it and be okay with it. And so then it feels really scary to even imagine making a friend, especially as an adult, right? And so we really want to just that it's going to take a lot of work, and it takes a lot of support. And so you might need someone helping you through that as a therapist, or, you know, someone who can help you understand how to break out of that isolation slowly and gently and safely. And how do we make friends again when we live in a world of isolation? It's a risk.
It's a risk.
It's a huge risk we're taking when we say, okay, I'm going to try to like, let this person in.
In terms of just community, I mean, we're talking about community and being there for each other and resources in this valley. I think there's some really great ones. Yourself, obviously. Is there anything or anyone or any books or what kinds of resources could you offer, if any, or in the valley, outside of the valley, anything that you want to share from that standpoint?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Really just speaking to like maybe this early motherhood phase, that's what I'll speak to. I myself try really hard to offer different kinds of resources. Some folks may not want to engage in therapy, and I totally understand that. And so I've worked with, other really amazing community organizations. And coming up, the first one I want to speak to is I do a book club at the library in the summertime. It's called Caregiving Conversations. Yeah, and so this is for anyone. You don't have to be a mom. You could be a dad. You could be a grandma. We've had, nannies, caregiver, any caregiver for young children. And we just pick books that help us have a conversation about what it's like to take care of our children. And so our first book this summer is called The Good Mother Myth by Nancy Redding. And so if you have enjoyed our conversation here today, especially about sort of the social context, about what it means to be a modern mother, this is going to be a really important book to read.
And we will link that in our resources.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's happening all summer. So we have 3 books, one for the month of June, July, and August. And you can go to the Gunnison Library's website and check out and we'll list the books. I don't think our book number 2 and 3 is up yet. The Grove, it's a slow build, and so I continuously try to bring in other programming in here. Right now we have a mindfulness class for kids. That's on Thursday evenings at 4 p.m. And you can go to the Grove's website and check on the calendar, and it will tell you what's happening. It is thegrovemotherwellness.com.
Anything else you want to highlight about anything? And then we'll ask kind of our wrap-up question.
I want to speak to my therapy services. And so I offer individual therapy for mothers from pregnancy up to 3 years postpartum, and even with miscarriage and infant loss and grief support. And so if you are finding yourself needing support and you live in the Gunnison Valley, you can jump on my other website, mothersagetherapyservices.com, get engaged through that. I also do a 6-week motherhood course called Motherwell. And this is actually my joy. And I love doing group work and speaking really to that community piece that mothers do need mothers. And this is a great way to sort of like take that first step in a sort of guided structure way of being able to be vulnerable and share your raw experience as a mother. And we dive into some of the big emotions that aren't often talked about. My next cohort will probably be in the fall. So look out for that.
I mean, we've touched on so many amazing things, from community to, the structures around us that impact this entire experience, to the word matrescence. I mean, like, what didn't we touch on? There's so much more, but like, I just want to say thank you. But we always, I think, in our interviews, we want to make sure we give space to, can you share a moment that truly felt like the power of the village in action? Our podcast is about the village and trying to build that back up. Anything specific? Like, this was the moment.
Such a beautiful question. And I just I'm having so many memories run through my head right now. And I've been so blessed. And also, I've worked hard to build a village, right? Again, it's really hard for me to answer that because, it comes in these micro moments. And so I just think about this community as a whole and how many incredible people live here and kind-hearted people live here, and that we want to take care of each other. And I see it show up in so many different ways. And teaching my daughter that she has there are trusted people in this community who have eyes on her. I'm not alone in this. And so I'm just going to shout out to I walk into Natural Grocers and everyone knows our name and they know my daughter and they help her, and and then everyone from all these other places we go in town to, the Dilly Deli, and we just we live in this network, this small town, and so the village feels more attainable.
It does.
And so we have to go out of our way to say, hey, how are you today? And right. And it makes a difference because now I just I feel very supported in my community, seeing these familiar faces, and they light up when they see us and we light up when we see them. And what a difference that makes in our hearts and our souls and our spirits.
It is true. It is those tiny moments of just, yes, we're going to have a conversation.
Supported.
Instead of just transact.
Exactly.
Yep. Really awesome.
Yeah. And we know that is so important to our well-being.
Yes.
Is to have these small interactions with people on a daily basis, not just every now and then, but every day. Right? Yep. So I would say.
It gives us hope.
Hope.
It really does. Unless there's anything else you want to touch on, hope is a really great place to land.
I agree.
Yeah. There are reasons to be hopeful. And I think currently, the climate that we live in is very divisive and can feel really heavy, but there is hope.
There is hope.
So I think with that, just thank you so much, Louise.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
It's been wonderful.
It's a pleasure too on my end. It's been a very joyful and delightful conversation.
Just remember, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be you. Don't forget to follow us on social media at ITA_village_pod. And rate and review us on Apple and Apple, Spotify. It helps boost our visibility. Just thanks everyone for listening, and we look forward to talking to you next time. Thank you. Bye. Oh my God.
We did it!